I wanted to quickly do sort of like a quick philosophical sort of question mark video about whether you're using modelling or amps live and your rationale for those decisions. And so I was just chatting to David Beebe today, and he recently-ish has been going down the fractal FM3 route, and he said to me I'm basically as happy with my tone as I've ever been, and he doesn't really feel like there's a compromise anymore. And I'm sort of inclined to think that once you've sorted out the conundrum, and it is a bit of a conundrum I think, of bringing your modeler to life in the live situation, that might be the last big part of the puzzle to try and solve. I think in studios and in bedrooms all over the place, you're very used to using modelling devices generally. We're used to that idea of, you know, basically once you've got a thing mic'd up and you've heard the sound of that recorded, you know, on the radio or whatever, on records, you're probably hearing loads of modelling devices, whether guitar or drums or whatever, synths. You're very used to hearing digitally modelled devices. I think probably the jury is pretty much in on that, that as listeners, basically we're just listening for the tone and the part, and probably we're not going to be able to differentiate between real amps and a good modelled tone anymore anyway. So there's a set of compromises to be had though, which could lead you down the route of either using a real amp live still, your dinosaur you, or using a modelling device live. And there might be little amps like this which sit nicely in the set of compromises and stuff. So for me, one of the big factors of why I like to take a little modelling device is that sometimes I have to carry a whole PA in my car as well, and in that case bringing something just for the guitar is not always that easy, especially if I have to take someone else in the car as well with me to the gig. And something like the HX Stomp then becomes pretty much the only option that I could take, or you know, a Helix or an FM3 or whatever, because I don't have space for a real guitar amp. They are substantially bulkier than just a modeler. And then also you've got the weight issue, you know, so this is considerably lighter than most amps. And for me, recently I discovered the fun of a back pain, or you know, a back issue, and for me now that's also a factor, and also why I quite like this as an option, given that it's not going to cause me spinal issues, hopefully. But without adequate kind of on-stage reinforcement, modelling can, I think, fall apart a little bit. And in the same way as some people say, well, this valve amp doesn't really sound good unless you turn it up, or you know, I can't really get it sounding good at this volume. I think most of what that's about is kind of hearing yourself on stage and getting enough body in the guitar tone that you can sort of feel that and get a bit of interplay with that. So I think that's actually the same between modelling and valve amps. I think there might be a bit of a misconception that modelling sounds worse, but maybe what we're really thinking about is stage volume being an issue, where it's much more difficult to fight your case that your modelling device needs to be louder. And I think that's a fight that I've had to have, not a literal fight. You know, it's not to come to blows yet. But you know, fighting to have enough stage volume with your modelling device that you feel comfortable, and that you're getting some of that interaction that you sort of remember from the valve amp world. I think that might be part of what's going on. So if you have to compromise with your valve amp volume on stage as well, I think that can be equally dissatisfying as going out with a dodgy modelling rig. You know, going out and barely turning these knobs up, or you know, having to turn down mid-set because some sound guy doesn't like the sound of a guitar anymore. Could be something to contend with. The other kind of big thing for me is that with a modelling device, I've got access to, you know, literally thousands of sounds, and with a valve amp and a selection of pedals, you've got a way smaller pool to choose from. Things like high cuts on a cabinet and global EQs don't really come into play with a real amp. Now that's oftentimes not a bad thing, oftentimes limiting those choices down to a few kind of key choices. You know, you've got a gain, treble, mid, bass, presence, maybe an EQ. You know, on a complicated amp like this, you've got a couple of channels and, you know, that sort of stuff. For me, yeah, the Mark 525, I'm taking it out again tonight to see where I'm sitting on this kind of argument. So this, in terms of what I'd be taking to a gig, space-wise, takes up about as much as a modeler and a power cab, or something like that. So I can take this along with my Mesa Boogie open back with an EVM12. I'm going to use an HX effects in the loop, so I get some of the convenience of like the modelling world, you know, where you've got access to lots of effects and ability to change lots of aspects of a sound with one button. And I'm not having to mess around with the pedal board, which is one of those things which I've kind of decided is not for me. As cool as individual pedals are, the hassle of taking a pedal board as well as whatever else you're using, to me doesn't seem worth it in a dodgy function gig. So yeah, that's what I'm going to take tonight. This is going to be the second time in a week that I will have gigged this particular rig, and you know, looking back at the gig footage, I did find it pretty cool. The thing is, this is a versatile enough amp and has the channel switching aspects that I think I can get the best of both worlds with the HX effects, and it being a small valve amp but with plenty of flexibility and sounds good, hopefully, that it's bridging that gap for me. If it comes to being a bigger amp, you know, like a Mesa Boogie Lone Star or, you know, the Mark III or whatever, I'm trying to think about the scenario where I'd end up taking that out, and I'm not really finding it that easy to balance those compromises because it's such a big weighty amp. It doesn't have things like a digital out for the desk. Those are the things that I kind of am starting to think are important for the normal jobbing guitarist like me. So let me know in the comments, what are the compromises that you've made to go down the modelling route, or what are the compromises that you're willing to make to go down that route, or are the compromises that you've made that have sent you back down the road of a valve amp. Do you like, even though it's heavier and stuff, do you prefer the feel that you've got on the stage? I guess for me as well, the main kind of factor is, are you going to enjoy that gig? So if you can't enjoy a gig on a modelling device or an in-ear device, no matter how much you try, then what's the point? To me, you might as well get the funny looks of taking along a big valve amp, as long as it sounds good and as long as it's not, you know, wrecking the gig. If you're getting more enjoyment out of that, then I think that's totally the way to go. I do know people that have battled these kind of in-ear gigs, particularly on bass, and done it for a number of years, and I think to myself, wouldn't it just be easier if you brought a bass amp and you wouldn't have had these 2-3 years of ball ache going into in-ear monitors and never really feeling particularly comfortable on a gig? I don't see the point in that either, so that's why I'm experimenting with different bits and pieces, because I think it's fun. And I do think a real valve amp, if you've got it running a little bit on stage, a bit of stage volume, you know, you've got a live drummer, you can probably afford to do it. I think that is a little bit more fun, a little bit less convenient in some ways maybe, but maybe that's part of the questions. So what compromises have you made? What compromises won't you make? Is valve amp forever going to be the way to go for you? Have you tried modelling and gone back to valve? All the questions. Let's fill up the comments, and so that hopefully this video gets seen by more than 2 people. Mum and Dad, alright?